So here's Bob on the house. How's the war going for Russia? Not very well. Wang, Lavrov, British Foreign Secretary, United States, two chats with Morrison. India really is in the limelight. But what's happening on the ground, right? Pentagon says Russia no more in control of Kherson. Then Russia sends mixed signals. He says pessimism is replacing optimism over Ukraine as Russia sends mixed military and diplomatic signals. After seeming progress in Tuesday's peace talks in Istanbul, Wednesday brought new attacks on the outskirts of Kyiv and the northern city of Chernihiv, areas where Russia claimed it would reduce combat operations. The confusion stems not just from a mismatch between words and actions. On Wednesday, the Kremlin's top spokesman said that there had been little progress. Hours later, its chief negotiator said Ukraine was on track for building normal and I hope so good neighborly relations with Russia. US intelligence suggested that Vladimir Putin, Russia, was being misinformed about the invasion, from aides fearful about his reaction stoking tensions with his Ministry of Defense. On the ground, the humanitarian situation is worsening. It's like living in a horror movie, said a resident of Hulaipol, a town on the edge of the Donbas region. 4 million people have fled Ukraine, 2 million of them children, the UN reported. This is from the New York Times. Russia shells its cities it promised to spare in peace talks, says Ukraine. Russia shells areas in Ukraine where it vowed to scale back. Putin advisors afraid to tell him truth on Ukraine. Kiev West had cautioned Moscow's peace gesture was cover for reorganizing forces. What's he going to reorganize? He's got nothing to reorganize. He's sitting on a pile of dirt. Russian foreign minister to visit India close on heels of Wang trip. India to emphasize on early return to dialogue, diplomacy to end conflict. No limits. So he's coming from China. Wait, remember, he's coming from China. Wang Yi was on the other hand coming from Pakistan after meeting OIC and fingering India. You figure this out, folks. This is a pincer move from both of these. One to save the Rick and the brick. The other to save his manna from heaven, which is India's money for his defense equipment. You got to watch that out and use that as leverage. No limit on cooperation with Russia, says China. Continue to beat. It's got nowhere to go. Amid war, top Russia, US, UK officials head to Delhi. Okay, Russia's Lavrov arrives today amid Ukraine war, reducing dependency on Russia's focus of trust visit. This is now the American, right? This is what's about. Goyal meets US deputy NSA. This is what you guys got to remember. This is what the German NSA has to tell Dover. Turmoil if countries define geography through history. Both revanchist nations, whether it is Russia or China, and they're both defining geography through history, and it hurts India if we continue to stay on the side of Russia. India close to clinching oil deal with Russia. Oof. Government in no rush. So what the government says, the government in no rush to resume trade with Russia and CIS. No plan to pay for Russian crude oil in rupees, says center. Stick with it. Because Russia wants the other. India doubles down on moves to procure oil from Russia. Well, that's really kind of strange. I don't know why this has to be a highlight. Let it do it. Like the Russian guy comes, Lavrov and Wang, and it's kept below the radar. Keep this below the radar. Well, who are you trying to send a message to, right? The people you don't want to send a message to is the second and the third circle in the United States and the West, which is the legislative people and the population. You don't want to look like a dimwit, when you're doing this as a person who's got siding with people who's brutalizing a civilian population. PSU's tanking up on Russian crude. Here we go once again. Signal of India keeping its fuel options open. Iran ready to meet India's energy needs. Go with Iran because Iran is opening a space, folks. No restrictions on ruble trade, says Russia. Yeah, sure is, right? Are we going to risk it? Absolutely not. Because the Singh, who Singh is king, who's sitting as the head of sanctions, knows what to do, folks. Knows what to do. Maybe he'll nail, guess who? He might nail Adani. He might nail Ambani. Then what, right? Russia requests clearance of payment worth 1.3 billion. I'm not sure how we are going to manage that. Kuch na kaho, why India should not toe Biden line. The Shoba Day. These are all, like I said, leftovers of our socialism. Right? Get rid of them. Right? Because they constantly, beat up. That's all they can beat up on. They can't beat up on our own government. They can't beat up on the Russian government. But beat up on the American government. People like Shoba Day, right? Unbelievable. Forget respect for international law, etc. Biden's message is simple. Back off Putin and let America dominate. When both nations are bullies, one has more money, but the other is sitting on oil. Take your pick. This time, Uncle Sam has been caught on the wrong foot. Miss Shoba Day I guess you don't have any lessons in geopolitics, and you could not be more wrong. And this is not what the people of India are thinking. Only intelligentsia steeped in socialism like you. Cheers. So you gotta, think about what all USSR or Russia has done in Europe before you suddenly decide to be very sanctimonious about the United States, right? You really have to, right? Because seems to be the favorite pastime. Boom, boom, beat up on the US, beat up on the US, forgetting completely what the USSR was up to. There were two sides of the same coin, folks. Shrinkline, US ahead of UN resolution on crisis. This is history gone by. India abstains from UN voters for against Russia. Says UNGA draft did not fully reflect concerns. India's UNSC stand gladdens West. UNGA abstention a concern. Indian abstains at UNSC again. India abstains from another UNGA vote. But Russia gets China backing to stay in G20. So when Lavrov comes from one side after visiting China, Wang comes from the other side after visiting Pakistan, you got to worry. In fact, we should have probably not honored any of these guys. And we should I'm going to tell you what he should be told. Wang reaches Delhi set to meet Jaishankar Doval today. India banks avoid Russia entities on West backlist. In UNSC, India abstains on resolution by Russia. So here's the deal, man. So that's like I said. But you got to think about this. This is what the folks who are really hurt say about Russia and NATO. This is Ukraine and myth about NATO. The arguments that European countries have cornered or encircled Russia by joining NATO or allowing other countries to join NATO are false propaganda to justify Vladimir Putin's imperial vision. Imperial vision. Just like the Chinese imperial vision. We, the envoys of the Bucharest Line, a group of NATO's eastern flank countries that joined the alliance after the end of the Cold War, feel that the Indian public deserves to be acquainted with the basic facts on the ground. Firstly, it must be underlined that NATO is not an organization that expanded to the east. It was we, the independent European states, that decided on our own to go west. Our countries have been for decades either forcefully occupied and annexed by the Soviet Union, for example, the Baltic states, subdued by it against their will, and even invaded Hungary in 56, former Czechoslovakia in 68. The tragic events of the Second World War and its aftermath placed us against the will of our people on the wrong side of the Iron Curtain and deprived us of self-determination. And we should stand by that, folks. We should stand by that. Independent foreign policy. With NATO's membership, our borders became secure for the first time in our history. The threat of invasion by a foreign power was unlikely with the collective defensive support of our allies, one for all for one. Secondly, neither our decision to join NATO nor the organization itself poses a threat to Russia. It's a defensive alliance, one that seeks no territory. You got to understand that. NATO stands for freedom, democracy, rule of law, and respect for smaller nations. Russia, on the other hand, committed to respecting Ukraine's sovereignty in return for Kyiv giving up its nuclear weapons in the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurance in 1994, and then they broke that obligation. Finally, the people of Ukraine are fighting today for the same opportunities that our countries had in the last 3 decades. The Ukrainian people want to exercise their right. Ukraine today has become a symbol of the fight with imperialism for all. No state wants to be a buffer zone or part of another sphere of influence, folks. Let's grow up, right? And who are the people? Neither our decision to join NATO nor the organization itself pose a threat to Russia. Or like I said, who have signed this, right? Ambassador Bulgaria, Ambassador Estonia, Ambassador Hungary, Ambassador Latvia, Ambassador Lithuania, Ambassador Poland, Ambassador Romania, Ambassador designate Slovakia, and Roman Ambassador charged DFA's Czech Republic. Folks, grow up. Shoba Day. Listen to these guys. Not Biden. I don't understand this, right? And what do we have here? Jayant Prasad writes, to avoid a cold turkey, if Moscow is okay with Kyiv joining EU and Kyiv is okay with not ever joining NATO, talks may yield results. I think it's going somewhere. Steadfast Ukraine policy in national interest based on 6 principles, says EAM. Right. But what do we have here with Radhika Kumar saying that with the bear arriving in India, what should be done? It says, as Putin's war has progressed, a number of tired, not so true truisms have been dredged up about a reliable defense partner Russia is. But dependability has been in short supply since Putin came to power. His administration has delayed deliveries, ratcheted up prices, and excluded India from areas of key security concern such as Afghanistan under Taliban and access to Central Asia. It has chosen China over India on every issue, folks, on every issue. That a rare moment of confluence for India's moral and strategic interests. With all eyes on it, China will not pursue its salami slicing along our borders for a while. That gives us a little breathing space to diversify arms supplies, which will better spur India's military modernization, continued dependence on Russian weaponry, or strengthening security partnerships through the Quad and perhaps Europe. That's the one we want. And what do we have here, folks? Think about this and think about this really, really hard. Russia, it's time sell by date. I guess we got to keep it on our side. I mean, we got to keep it somewhat in play, but don't give it an over emphasis, folks. Cheers. So, folks, like I told you, we continue to have apologists for Russia and USSR and its action, or Russia's action. What people forget is the kind of, Europe has had a brutal past since the 1800s, one empire against the other. Russians were hammered by the Polish and the Latvians and the USSR. Then USSR was one of the most brutal regimes. Look at what it did to all of Central Asia. Look at what it did to the Baltic states. Look at what it did to Czechoslovakia, Poland, behind the Iron Curtain. We don't even know what it was like, and we still come on and say, oh, Russia has a right, Russia has a right. But you got to listen to what the Germans said, the German NSA. If you decide your geography based on history, you're going to have trouble, and India is going to be one of the collateral damages if it continues to do that. So what's about these Chinese, right? Hope China follows independent India policy. Jaishankar to Wang, both hold talks on Ukraine, impact of curbs. Well, I was told, Wang was told in no uncertain terms, and there is no discussion till they walk back to the original positions post pre-2020, right? Wang Yi, little relief on LAC. His visit appears to miss a crucial point that ties can only move ahead if the standoff ends. This is because they want to bulldoze their thought process. They're just ogres, right? They're just not concerned about anybody else. No normal ties till LAC friction is on. Wang told India pushes Wang on quick LAC resolution. Let's wait for cows to come home because they ain't going to happen. But I'm glad when Wang was visiting. We had Army Siliguri corridor insertion drill coincide with Wang's India's visit. A message was sent. India, China mustn't let border issues hit. Wang, is he the run? Is he a nutcase? What do they think? We are served. Actually, they actually don't think that we are at the same level as them, this Middle Kingdom, right? Shanghai lockdown test limits of zero COVID shakes market. Record cases in Shanghai as virus testing increased. Biden also got on a call, and there was worry in India, a lot of propagation. Again, Russia and China suggesting that, maybe Biden is going to dump India. Didn't happen, folks, didn't happen. China delaying retirement due to aging population, and this is a worry for India and what we are trying to do with our population policy. We've got to be really careful. That's the advantage we have. Then we have Chinese, so basically the US, the Department of Commerce said Monday that it will investigate whether Chinese solar producers are illegally circumventing solar tariffs. It's time that they're going to play ball. And look at what Ruchi Sharma says, why China is cagey on Russia. You got to hear this, folks. All those guys who keep talking about China, powerful China. Hear this, right? And he's a smart guy because always hits the nail on the head. He says, for all the focus on how Russia's economy is in trouble, isolated and battered by Western sanctions for its war on Ukraine, its most important ally, China, faces serious tremors as well. No other major country is showing deeper sinkholes of economic trouble than China. He says China's economic growth rate has already slowed sharply since its double-digit peak around 2010, but less sharply than its mounting demographic and debt problems would suggest based on historical patterns. He says, the West thus faces a more vulnerable and possibly less unified Eastern Front in the new Cold War than many global observers have accounted for, including the Chittarati in India, right? With an economy just 1/10 the size of China's, Russia is in a state of financial peril without equal, largely cut off from the world. But to an extent widely underappreciated, China faces perils too and risks great damage to its vulnerable economy if it does anything that cancels foreign capital. That means Beijing is likely to think twice before offering generous support to Russia or defying Western sanctions against Putin's war. Hear that, all the guys sitting on the fence here, folks. China, and that's why Shyam Saran says China's no limit pact with Russia has its limits. China is also averse to taking risks as Chinese Communist Party is preparing to convene the 20th Party Congress later this year. Right? China may have expected, like Russia, that faced with a massive military assault, Ukraine would quickly surrender and accept Russian terms. And that, folks, is where all the miscalculation for Wang Yi, all happened, folks. They couldn't have expected when they were hugging Mr. Putin during Winter Olympics that this was going to go down the pike. It's a slippery slope for China, and it's even a slipperier slope for Russia, folks. And it'll be A parachute, it'll be a jump without a parachute for India if it continues to do this. Jai Hind.